Artists use lies to tell the truth. Yes, I created a lie, but because you believed it, you found something true about yourself. Alan Moore, V for Vendetta. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Shyamansky. Joining us again is Robin Whitten, the founder and editor of AudioFile Magazine. Welcome back, Robin. You were here not too long ago, maybe about 3 months ago, so happy to have you back.
Yes, well, glad to be here again, Jacob. Thanks.
Of course, and you're here because it's June, and June is a busy season in your neck of the woods with audiobooks, with June being Audiobook Month. Like, well, what is that around? This month must be really busy around AudioFile Magazine right now.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's a great focus. I mean, it's Audiobook Month every month at AudioFile Magazine.
Yes.
But in June, we have lots of other people who want to focus on audiobooks as well. So that makes it, it makes it busy. It gives us the opportunity to reach more people and to hopefully, engage more people in the whole listening experience of audiobooks.
Right, and it's summertime for a lot of students, and people are finding themselves on vacation. You just have a lot more time for audiobooks. It's the perfect month for it, too. Now, one thing you're especially focusing on is your golden voices. What is a golden voice?
Well, a golden voice is an accolade that AudioFile Magazine started over 20 years ago to celebrate the careers of particularly brilliant audiobook narrators in their audiobook work, and trying to celebrate a narrator who has had a career with a lot of audiobook work, a great range of audiobook work, and consistently brilliant work in the storytelling medium.
And you've inducted 3 new people to your Golden Voices catalog, which is basically like a hall of fame for audiobook narrators. So if you're looking for a book that's especially well narrated, go to AudioFile's Golden Voices page, and you have your list of Golden Voices. They're all unbelievable narrators. And the 3 that you've inducted this year have a minimum of 400 titles to their name. One of them has 800 titles to her name, which is absolutely bonkers. They are Kimberly Farr, Hilary Huber, and Vikas Adams, who I actually interviewed on the show not too long ago.
Oh, well, all of them are wonderful to talk to. And we have talked to each one of them with interviews and a podcast with each one. But, it's so exciting to celebrate their work. The work that, all audiobook narrators do, especially when they've recorded hundreds of audiobooks. The range of the work that they've done is so amazing. And, in all genres, not all genres, but so many genres, and so broadly played in as characters in audiobooks over, their entire careers.
Do you want to go through each of these new entries? We talk a little bit about each one of them. I know that you guys did interviews with all of them in anticipation of this announcement. Do you want to go with Vikas Adam first?
Sure. Let's talk about Vikas because, well, he's fun. He's fun to talk to. They're all fun to talk to, but he's fun to talk to, and his work in audiobooks has ranged from, well, I mean, as I say, they all have this great range. So, but Vikas has done fantasy, mystery, family sagas, particularly with South Asian characters. He has done YA titles that have been very popular and successful. I mean, he's had this whole range of work. And I think, they all have just a unique storytelling skill where they inhabit the characters that they are presenting to us as listeners. And, Vikas can really one of the things that I appreciate particularly about his work is that he can make a listener feel that there is an entire room full of characters having a dialogue, a cast, as you might hear a cast, but actually it's just Vikas. And he is doing all the voices. He's changing in microseconds between the chatter of the characters, and it's quite astonishing.
It seems like you would expect all high-level audiobook narrators to have that ability to embody multiple different characters with drastically different voices, but some narrators are fascinating to listen to, even though they don't do these crazy distinctive voices. They're not these very actory actors. Like
Right.
their voices are much more subtle, and sometimes it works. Vikas is one of those narrators that really embodies the characters and really like goes all out, almost like Shakespearean.
Right, but he can do that
The
sort of
subtlety.
when the text demands it. In fact, I
Mm.
listened to a sample this morning from his interview, and we play a selection from a mystery that is set in ancient Rome. Now, the characters they're kind of big characters in a sense and he plays them with a great sense of flair, a little pretty wry, and I thought the whole thing was quite funny
Big
because
characters.
because they, here are the characters wearing togas and talking like they've just come from the mall. So but he pulls it off. I mean, that's the way it was written, and it's funny, but he does what the author intended, and that's very sort of broad characters, as you say, but he also can be quite subtle with his characters and the emotional connection that he makes with them, reflecting their emotions.
So yeah, shout out to Vikas Adam, newest golden voice for AudioFile, especially because he's a fellow Canadian. Moving on to the next
Yeah.
one, we have Kimberly Farr, and in the interview article that you released um, since her inauguration into the Golden Voices catalog, you asked the question, what has surprised you the most in your work in audiobooks? And I loved her answer. She talked about how she's been shown that there's so much wonderful writing being done, that in narrating all these audiobooks, you kind of get this appreciation for um, how there's still such amazing literature coming out. Even like the books that are really popular are often still excellent works of literature. And it's so tempting to say that, oh, writing is going downhill. Like there's no more good books anymore. And I really dislike that cynicism. I'm totally on her side, thinking that there's still so many amazing books coming out. Mm,
I completely agree, and
mm,
I think the way we sort of have a whole. It's certainly not new. As listening to a book is not a new experience for us if you've been listeners for years, but for many people, it's like, oh wow, now I hear this story. I can experience this story with an emotional connection that the narrator facilitates, that brings us into the story, whether it's a very intimate story. And Kimberly, I think, is so brilliant at some of the really wonderful literary fiction that she has done.
mm.
And, you
Poetry
know,
too.
poetry. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
I love her Mary Oliver. She's done a number of Mary Oliver's collections. And I have to say that hearing those collections was not maybe the very first experience I had with Mary Oliver's work, but it made it so much richer, that I could, you know, I was just involved and enveloped in the poem.
Poetry does very well when spoken out loud, but it needs to be done tastefully. And it's a particular challenge for narrators to do those poetry collections.
Right, and one of the funny things that I didn't realize is that there's in the poetry world, there is a poet's voice. So it's the poet reading their own work,
Oh,
which can be not
yeah.
as it depends, I guess, how you feel about it. It's not what I think is the most always the most successful. And that having the a narrator who can really, just like a good story of any kind, can really understand where the poet was going and make an emotional connection with the everything about the cadence of the line, and it really makes a big difference. And that's the way I felt about Kimberly's work on with Mary Oliver's poems.
Interesting. Is it seen as a faux pas for someone other than the poet themselves to read out the poem? Like, it's like, is there
Mm,
something seen as like kind of as a faux pas for an external narrator to do that?
well, I don't think it's really that, but I
Mhm.
think a lot of poets want to own their words in their voice, possibly more than an author of a novel. Maybe not always, but because authors like to read themselves also. But I think poets
I could
are
see
very
that.
used to performing their work.
Poetry is
And
more personal,
yeah,
right? If you're
yeah.
writing
Mm,
fiction, it's like external to you all. It's a lot more
mm,
external to the author than poetry is to its writer.
interesting.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Something that's always remarkable about narrators is the work that they put in preparing for a narration. Hillary Huber is the third Golden Voice you guys are inducting into your Golden Voices catalog this year. That's Hillary Huber, and she in the interview file that you sent us, that you posted, is how before there were these pronunciation websites that you can go and do research and find out how things are pronounced, even in like other languages. She would have to call embassies to find out how foreign words were pronounced, and she would be put on hold for hours sometimes just to get the pronunciation for a couple words. That's that's that dedication that you just have to appreciate.
Oh, absolutely. And it is, I mean, it's so appreciated, but it's so important, because sometimes the authors themselves don't know, they've written a word, but they might not actually have heard it.
Oh, that's funny.
Or they know exactly what it is in some a regionalism that, I mean, Maine and is full of regional words that are pronounced very oddly, that you would have to call, no embassies, but the public library is always a good resource for narrators to call up to get, how is that town, how is your town pronounced.
I'm sure you've done a lot of interviews with narrators, and what they do to prepare is pretty mind-boggling. I think it was Julia Whalen that told us that she compiles an Excel document where she has notes about all the different characters and even like a little sound clip for all the voices, so that if that character shows up in chapter 2, but not for another 40 chapters, when
Right,
they come up in chapter 45, that she remembers how she did the voice. um
right.
and that stuff takes ages. Like, this is
It does,
eh,
yeah.
like
And I think it's so interesting, and I think Hillary talks a little bit about doing a series where you have characters that are recurring. Now you really need, because some character is going to, not show up for several different books before they turn up again, and
yes.
also they may have aged. So that's another thing that
Oh.
I think, that the narrators pay attention to.
Oh, that's true. You have to pay such good attention if you're a narrator, to find out those descriptions of the voice of a character. because sometimes when an author doesn't write with the audiobook in mind, which is more often than not the case, the description of the voice, for example, their reedy, breathy voice, or the large sounding voice, a deep baritone, it might come in the third, like in the third quarter of the book. And so that's why you need to read it first, right? Because it would be hilarious to do like the impression of a voice, really high pitch, and then dialogue tag is like he said in his deep baritone.
Yes,
You don't want to contradict yourself, eh?
and and there are horror stories that you hear from narrators who have gotten, didn't do the prep as thoroughly as they might have, and missed that or didn't get there to the next to last chapter where the deep baritone was identified, and they're going to have to go back and start again,
Oh
which
my
is
god.
that is a pretty big horror story, I think.
Re-record every single
Yeah,
line of
yeah,
dialogue. It's like an
yeah.
urban legend amongst narrators to come across that like voice description that contradicts everything that you did before.
Right. And I think that especially that just reinforces how important the preparatory work is. And what, and hear Hillary talk so fabulously about that. I thought that was great. And she also said something that I'd love to point out about, because many narrators now record at home and they engineer their own recordings. They don't have a director. And, in the earlier days of audiobooks, and still some people do have the opportunity to record in a studio with an engineer and with a director which is really terrific. And she pointed out that, when you're recording alone, it's a little bit like one hand clapping. And I like that.
Kind of weak.
Is not being, there's nothing on the other side to compliment, and you get no feedback. You have to catch yourself, and it seems a monumental task to me, that you would be immersed in the story as the narrator, and also be hyper aware of any uh, change in your breathing, in your tone, all the things that basically engineers and directors are there to do, and to say, bring down the level a little bit, or maybe start that scene a little quieter, or something like that. The many things that directors do contribute.
It's so interesting that all these narrators, it's not just that they have their own styles, it's that the way they produce their workflows can be very different. Some people work at home, some people work in studios, some people work without a director, without an engineer. Some people work with an engineer and a director. So it's a team of three that are present during the entire time there. And all those different decisions lead to very different ways of recording. And there's even different ways of punching in your recordings. For example, you could just hit record and go, and that includes all the mistakes. And then some intern on the other end has to get rid of all the flubs. Or you can do punch in recordings, which is a little bit more
Mhm.
involved, but it basically just means stopping and starting every time you make a
Mhm.
mistake, basically. And so like it's kind of like editing on the fly, but that means you need to be used to um the feeling of getting interrupted all the time, which can be really frustrating if you're trying to get in the flow, and you can only imagine how important that is for a narrator.
Right, but I do think that's part of the training that they get from doing hundreds of audiobooks, but also, that's part of the process, where I understand that often, that authors, when they read, their own work, they just want to go in and start reading. Well, that's really when you need the engineers and the directors, and they get that authors can get fairly annoyed when they're being stopped
Yeah.
about, mispronouncing a word, and I think I always think of that as quite a skill for a producer or director to, some famous author is being corrected on their pronunciation of a word they wrote, and do it and have it work out the right way and get on with the next chapter.
Sometimes I wonder about that with like celebrities who write memoirs and then record their own
Mhm.
narrations, how frustrating it must have been to record that audiobook. Where sometimes like
I
you must imagine the producer in the booth must have been grumbling like, God, I just wish they got a professional narrator to do this. Because
or
they're making
will
mistakes.
we
They're making mistakes.
right, and will we get through this and stay alive to tell the tale?
So one of the reasons we have to celebrate human narrators is because AI narrators are becoming increasingly more and more, I won't say popular, but accessible. There has been an increase in people consuming AI narrations. So it's not just that it's out there, but the people are
Mhm.
consuming them more. And you were interviewed about exactly this not too long ago for a Creators Syndicate article. And if I can quote you, Robin, you said, "Do you want a story told to you without a soul? Did the author write it without a soul?" Which I think is pretty telling. It's obviously written with the humanity in there. And I totally agree with you that AI kind of strips away the humanity in narration. I don't know how much AI narration you've heard, but what I always say is that it sounds good for a minute and then you realize that it's AI after 5 minutes, you know? Like, you listen to it for an extended period of time, and then you'll be like, "Oh, okay, wow, this really sucks."
Well, Jacob, I'm not sure I've lasted too long, but I completely agree with you. Is like,
Right.
it's not too bad, but then wait a minute. Nope, that they missed that pause.
Mm.
Nope, they didn't get that emphasis quite right. And I just hope that in with people listening to audiobooks that are narrated by AI voices, that that they they make a choice that it doesn't matter, not that they don't know that it might be different with a human narrator. It definitely would be different, but that the listener is making some kind of choice. So if I'm, I have a manual or a textbook of some kind, and I just need to get the details, and maybe there's not a lot of emotional content or needs to be, or even pacing and sort of a tone but uh, just to get the information. um, if you make that choice, that would be one thing. But if you think that's all a story of a fictional story or a work of literature could be, I think you're sort of missing the real magic of audiobooks and what makes them very special and enjoyable for all of us.
I don't think anybody would say that AI narration is just as good as human narration. Like, it obviously isn't, and I haven't heard a single person make that argument. What we're afraid of is that AI narration is so much cheaper than human narrators, that human narrators, professional human narrators that we absolutely love, get forced out
Mm.
of jobs, and that we're
Mm.
stuck with only AI narration. Do you think that's a real possibility?
I would not like to think that. I mean, I don't know. I think it may change the landscape. Um, but as listeners, all of us out here, we have to say, no, we really want the human voice. We want that human connection that is, as I said before, is connecting you to something that was written by a human. So, the human wrote it. If
Hmm.
we're going to really feel that we are getting the voice of the person who wrote it, that's a human. It should be read by a human to us.
And I mentioned earlier that the consumption in AI narrated audiobooks has increased, and I think that's partly just because there's more of them available. But there was this the Audio Publishers Association's 2025 consumer
Mhm.
survey had a pretty interesting stat
Yeah.
where it can compare 2023 and 2025, and the willingness to try an AI narrated audiobook has dropped. Not a lot. In
Mhm.
2023,
Mhm.
77% of people were willing to try an AI narrated audiobook. And in 2025, it's at just 70%. So it dropped 7%,
Mm.
but that's notable. That said, 70% is pretty high. I'm kind of surprised, right?
It's pretty high to me. Um, but it's good to try. It's always good to try things. And I think cost comes in here, or accessibility. If you can't find
Hmm.
if you can't find a golden voice reading your favorite novel, I don't know. Maybe is it worth it to just listen to it with an AI, robot
Even if
reading
it's not
to
a
you? I
golden
don't
voice,
think.
I'd rather listen to it with a silver
Yeah.
voice or a bronze voice.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
But there is absolutely a point to be made about accessibility. Um, not just because sometimes people find it difficult to read print, but because it's expensive to produce audiobooks, and self-published titles just don't have the option. I met an author recently who is telling me that he plans on making an AI narrated audiobook for all of his books, purely for the accessibility of it, and he's going to be like selling it for really cheap, like much cheaper
Mm,
than a human narrated audiobook. But his idea is that if he does end up finding the need to release a human narrated audiobook, the human narration would be the standard price of an audiobook, and that the AI one would be like a significantly reduced one, because it's acknowledged that it's like a lot cheaper to do. You can still turn a profit. I'm concerned that they're going to be selling AI narrated audiobooks for the same price. And that's exactly what they're doing right now. You see it on Spotify, you see it on Audible.
mm,
It's the same prices, which drives me crazy. It should not be the same
right.
price.
Yes, of course, because somebody along the way is is taking the difference.
Yeah, that is quite the profit margin. That's all I'll say. Um, Robin, I want to thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything you want to plug coming up at AudioFile Magazine?
Well, I hope that
Mm,
listeners will
mm.
explore uh, more about the three new golden voices for 2025, but the 50 other golden voices who
Yeah,
are all profiled on our site are also worth exploring if you're not familiar with them. And we have a podcast, we have the interviews, the printed interviews, and we have all the access to the audiobooks that these wonderful narrators have recorded, so that you can sample them, you can figure out what you're going to listen to next.
perfect. Thank you so much, Robin. Have a good one.
Oh, thank you, Jacob.
That was Robin Whitten. She's the founder and editor of AudioFile Magazine. And again, those three new golden voices are Vikas Adams, Canadian, Kimberly Farr, and Hillary Huber. Congratulations to all of them. That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. AMI Audiobook Review airs weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio and repeats every 6 hours. We're also available on all the big podcasting platforms, and that includes YouTube. You can leave us your feedback at AMI Audiobook Review at AMI.ca. That's audiobook review at AMI.ca. I'm Jacob Shamansky. Thanks for listening.